Welcome to the latest podcast in a series from the Internationalist and the ANA. I'm Brendan Banaham, Managing Director of the Internationalist Group of Companies. We focus on the reinvention of marketing by connecting the people and ideas in international marketing through content, insights, thought leadership, community collaboration, and consulting. Today's podcast shares how people in our global community are not merely handling today's pandemic crisis, but helping us all to better navigate it. The ability to inspire people to be their best is valuable in difficult times, and no one does this better than marketers. I'll now turn the podcast over to Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist.
Whitney Fishman Zember has been helping brands and businesses understand media insights and communication trends, as well as technology-driven consumer-based insights for over 15 years. As managing partner, innovation, and consumer technology at Wavemaker US, she uncovers opportunities to harness technology to connect marketers with audiences in new and meaningful ways. Her ability to spot trends is second to none, and today she turns her lens to CES. Hey, Whitney, welcome to the show. I'm really glad that you're with us today.
Thank you for having me. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year for sure. Although somehow, I don't know if it feels like we've been in this new year for a while or we just wanted to get out of the old one. I'm not sure.
It's a lot of Groundhog's Day going on.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Well, look, you are such an expert on this and you've been following developments at CES for so long. I just can't wait to talk to you. But I thought that before we got into the trends, maybe we would just start with the elephant in the room. Could you characterize the difference that you felt between this first virtual CES versus past events? I know that you just love that sense of spontaneity when you walk down the convention floor and see something that sparks your imagination. But I'm betting that there's some benefits or ease or some new process of discovery that you also felt in this cyber version of the show. So really curious to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, listen, if anyone could prove that it can live on no matter the platform, it's probably supposed to be the tech conference, right? Mm-hmm. So I think as with everything, anyone, whether it's a work conference, a meeting, a large scale trade show like this, I think everybody's trying to figure out, how do you translate online? What facets need to be translated to create the experience of it and what doesn't? And where can there be replication or connectivity? And I think everyone's finding their ways. And obviously there's limitations of what's available right now. The CES this year was different, right? So instead of seeing you at the chandelier bar, it was a Zoom with a virtual chandelier background from the Wynn, or from the Cosmopolitan, which is fine. I'm sure people attended less but read more. I think there are pros and cons. So I think from my perspective, right, so I historically do tours, thought leadership experiences for Wavemaker Group MWEP. It was a different kind of chaotic. It was actually a lot harder than I thought it would be. I had a lot more roommates, right? I have 2 kids under the age of 4 at home, all of that fun stuff going on versus just being in Vegas and just FaceTiming with them once or twice a day. But I do think there's something different. You miss a lot of the conversations, the nuance, energy, the innovation of just running into people, catching up to people, frankly, talking to people on the floor. You could still meet with vendors and see their pitches, but it was much more flat. So you can see a video, you can see something, but you couldn't hold it in your hand. You couldn't try those goggles on. You couldn't see the glasses in person, really figure out what's vaporware and what's a potential reality. So it did remove a little bit of excitement. It did cut down on the number of attendees, and I think it was like 1,900 versus the 4,000 whatever previously, which isn't the worst thing. It's less to look at, but you tend to have people who are closer to market or more confident in their product versus a lot of just sort of phone cases, right? And ancillary companies that just clog the floors. I'm trying to think. You don't have the same thing. It's hard. We did a lot of thought leadership. We produced a lot of content. We answered a lot of questions, but it was what you expected it to be. And in some ways, scaled down, I think, is good because it lets you focus on what matters and what's important and what's going to be coming to the future and what actually matters versus a lot of sound bites and people trying to get in your face and a lot of swag and a lot of noise. So there was less noise and less cut through. But I think at the same time, it's hard, right? Because innovation isn't just technology. It's human EQ, it's human intuition, it's human understanding. So it's a little bit harder to connect those dots when you aren't holding the technology as a human versus a marketer and seeing the opportunities and sparking those ideas versus seeing it through a computer or a phone.
No, I think you make a very interesting point, and I hope we get into human versus technology in a little bit. But you also talked about what matters, and and which always makes kind of a curated event all the more interesting. But as to what matters, what for you were the top trending areas of greatest interest? And I don't know if that was simply because they were new or because they kind of pose the greatest potential to how we see the evolution of marketing.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, it's what you expected, right? There was it's a different type of health tech. There was a lot of touchless tech and pandemic tech, right? So there's sanitizers, sterilization, touchless screens. A lot of these things, frankly, it's the future expedited. I find it frustrating when a lot of people blame or attribute changes in retail, changes in technology to COVID. Frankly, it expedited a lot of changes that were needed in education, in the way that we work, in e-com, and frankly, in general. So it probably sped things up by a few years, but all of that had to happen or was bound to happen, right? But I thought it was interesting. You saw a lot of pandemic technology, and obviously you see a lot of sanitizing and cleaning and touchless, but we were moving more towards touchless anyway. I think what interests me is if you take a step back from all of that, whether it's touchless screens, touchless tech, touchless robots that serve your wine, robots that vacuum, all of that fun stuff, it's much more about integrated intuition, which was my big takeaway for the show. If you think about all of the things that can happen, all of the actual technologies, right? Whether it's on your wrist, around your forehead, you have all these things that monitor you. You have all of these things that collect data. So obviously, where telehealth was big, touchless technology was big, digital screens was big. All of these things ladder up to this notion where you have a lot of technology and you have a lot of opportunities. You have stuff to play with. It's pointless. If you're a marketer, none of it matters because you shouldn't be starting with technology. You need to start with human understanding. But what I find is really interesting is with more wearables connecting to more platforms between patient and doctor. You see a lot more opportunities for bringing in new data points, bringing in new insight, bringing in new ways of understanding how consumer behavior is scabbing and scarring through this pandemic, right? The short-term or long-term behavioral changes. And you can merge that with technology or with platforms to create this integrated intuition where there's an integrated, seamless experience where eventually, for us to get back on track as an economy, you need to be able to leave your house, go do your grocery shopping, go get your kids from school, go get in and out of your car, and not feel like you potentially are about to contract a deadly disease every time you open your window or get out of your car or move, right? There needs to be this sense of seamless. Like the truth is, a year ago today, you went to a store to go buy a shirt. You never questioned if you rolled up to the store, the lights were going to be on, there was going to be stock on the shelves, and there was going to be someone to help you if you needed it. And at some point you paid, right? You just assumed. So until we get to that point, there's a lot to go on. But that notion of seamless, when we are untethered from how we live, work, play, work out, learn, all of that fun stuff, when we have more touchless needs and we have more screens, more data points being shared through our wearables. There's a study this week that you could actually use things like the Apple Watch and the data points they already collect to see if somebody has COVID in advance and catch it earlier. All of that, it's wonderful. But if you don't bring that EQ side of it, understanding human nature and how things are changing and behavioral trends and why people are doing what they do and why they choose to do digital versus online versus still go to a store versus do curbside pickup versus, do some things outside, some things inside, some things distant, some things just alone. Until you can understand that, you can't really seamlessly merge it in a way that is going to be useful for a marketer. So if you can take that integrated intuition, right? All the integration capabilities that data brings you and technology can provide to expedite that data understanding and marry that really with human EQ-based understanding of who is your consumer, what are their needs. That's the best way to find these gaps of where you can provide utility in that white space where you can really be of service as a brand. And then you can bring in technology, which I think is probably the most exciting opportunity.
Well, that's a very good point that you make. And do you think that is the stumbling block of most marketers, that they get so excited about some of the technology, or at least maybe some of the data points that the technology can offer, that they forget to put the human side and the consumer behavior first? Or do you
I think sometimes you have this issue of buzzword bingo, right? Where you see something enough times that it's a thing. Right. So as a marketer, you want the headline, you want the award, you want the recognition, you want the press release. So you got to do the thing. You don't really understand what the thing is or why consumers are doing the thing, right? Because it's not if you build it, they will come, right? Consumers adopt technology and platforms for specific reasons. And it's not necessarily the reason that you create it or how you create it to be used. If you don't understand why consumers are leveraging a platform or technology the way they do, or how they actually use it when it goes out to market, you're really just checking the box, right? And then you're just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks, versus laddering up to really a larger innovation mission statement or a larger goal. So if you have your defined goal of defines ourselves as X, we stand for Y, our goal is to provide utility to consumers through Z. Once you have that goal and sort of, that North Star, you can ladder up your strategy. And it may include technology, it may not, but just throwing things against the wall because they're shiny, like an AR execution, a Snapchat filter, an app, right? It doesn't help if you're not providing utility and creating the seamless integrated offering, online, offline, that makes sense. Right? It's not plugged into your retail. It's not plugged into your online platform. It's not plugged into your strategy. It's not plugged into your messaging, frankly. And it's going to be a disconnect with consumers.
No, I certainly agree. But it also makes marketing the challenge that it is today to try to balance all of that. What I recall from the past is you usually take a look at maybe 10 big topics. Could you want to talk about what were your top 3?
Yes. Oh, top 3. Really? I'm pulling them up as we speak. I look at every year.
You can go for more. Go ahead.
So I think there's a lot of easy wins for marketers that don't necessarily rely on technology versus intelligence, frankly, and a bit of thinking. I love this idea of digitalizing dullness. If you think about everything with your everyday routine, right? Some of those routines have changed. I know I have the added layer of the COVID clean every night before we go to bed, where it's the Lysol on the handles and, the deep clean, because again, 2 kids under 4, it is a hot mess and I am too type A for this. I think everyday routine is great. We thrive on consistency. I think everyday routine, also the monotony, is slowly killing you inside in terms of, it shouldn't take this long. I shouldn't waste this much of my time with laundry and dishes. And what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And what do I do in the world at large? I think there's so much easy win in digitalized dullness, right? So people who swore they would never watch a TikTok or buy online, or the idea of someone else plucking their grapes for them or pulling a tomato for them is unheard of. They need to feel in the grocery store. Because of COVID and because of issues around safety and just confidence, people have been turning to online platforms to really get through their to-do lists, right? Whether they wanted to or not. The reality is, different facets of the life and lifestyle are going to come back in different speeds, right? So how you learn is going to change probably a bit faster than how you entertain. But there's going to be a lot of things like how you shop for your groceries and your toiletries and how you procure clothes and how you procure entertainment, things like that, where you probably had no interest pre-pandemic, right? Of streaming certain things or watching things or acquiring things certain ways online. But you're not only used to it, it's not bad. Right? You didn't want to try. You had to try, like trying your vegetables when you're a kid, but suddenly not bad. So I do think if you can get involved in helping consumers save time and digitalize their dullness, you are providing a utility by alleviating something that they know they have to do, right? It's not like going to the doctors once a year, but it's something they have to do. The laundry has to get done. The dishes have to get done. Dinner has to get on the table. But you're finding micro gaps and sort of the tiny bits of white space where you can alleviate things that consumers didn't know they could rely on you on, and they didn't know that you could help with. Frankly, they didn't look for that support before. And it's a great opportunity to position yourselves. I understand you. I know your needs. Even if it's one thing on your 50-point to-do list, I'm here to help. And I'm going to help you do it. and I'm going to physically provide that utility that you can sense.
No, that's wonderful. So that's one of yours, digitalizing dullness. Does something else spark? I know. Yeah.
Untethered living is huge, right? Mm-hmm. The way that you worked 12 months ago is gone. The way that you learn is gone. The way that you lived and entertained and Saturday night, date night, and dropping your kids off for school Monday, obviously, right?
Right.
The fact that you're not doing your commute. When you have this untethered living, right, all of a sudden you have location-based freedom, which is great. It's also terrifying. So you have things like flexibility of where you live, what jobs you look at, where you entertain, what you do. It changes a lot of your perspective in a long way. But at the same time, there's a lot of risk and confusion, right? Is this where I want to be permanently? Should I uproot my family? Do I want to move? Do I want to do these things? How do I procure things? How do I go about my life? But it's a lot of opportunity, outside of the home for touchless, bringing that touchless technology, that seamless experience, and seamless intuition. But also you have the opportunity to be there for consumers and help them move through life and find ways and help normalize things that are just, not that it's abnormal. And I don't like the term the new normal, but frankly, it's just not what you're used to. Right.
Yeah.
When you're freeing, it's also horrifying.
Right, because for all the untethered living that we're doing, a lot of us are staying in one room with our computer and everything else, our exercise bicycle and anything else that we need to find. So no, I'm always intrigued by the terms that you come up with that put so much of these in place. And I think that everyone will look forward to your longer piece where you can run through a lot of those categories.
For you, anytime.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. I could spend all day on them, to be quite honest with you.
Me too.
Right. What if you were to advise marketers on some technologies that they should pay attention to? And I know this is a bit more granular, and it might even kind of fly in the face of what we were just saying about, getting other things right before the technology. But what we find in our own research is that so many of them just feel so worried about the fact that they're not up to speed on certain things, particularly when it comes to technology. What did this CES tell you that marketers should be smarter about?
I think they need to look inward before they look outward, right? So, you're seeing more screens than ever, whether it's the Lenovo screen that rotated different directions based on the content that you're viewing. It's because the way that you would watch a TikTok video is different than a long form movie. There's lots more smart home technology, and frankly, smart home technology doesn't hit equally, right? So people who are interested and have the money in their home and invest in technology are going to continue to, whereas people who are more frontline workers or not investing to begin with, they're not going to be investing in. So it's not necessarily equal opportunity, which is rough and something to address completely. I do think that what marketers tend to do is see technology and say, oh, there's more smart home devices. We need to be in the home, right? Oh, there's more screens. And, again, a lot of these screens are supporting this OTT reckoning that I think is coming, because you may have gotten Disney Plus and Hulu and Netflix and all these platforms, and you're going to look back at your bills after tax season and say,
yes, what am I spending?
Right. And granted, you are watching more content, and you live one platform more than the other. And, Discovery has their new platform. Everybody has a platform. It's great for sampling, but do I need HBO and Netflix, right? At some point, that question is going to happen. I do think brands tend to get really excited of smart home is big. We need a voice thing. We need a visual. I do, and things like 5G, which will power all of this. 5G is incredible because it will power better experiences. And while we're not fully there yet with our rollout and with devices, anything that gets your device faster is a better experience. I do think there's this tendency to look outward versus inward first. And again, it goes back to forget the technology, forget the platforms. What is your what is your problem? What are you trying to solve for? What is your end goal? And then who is your consumer and what are they doing? And then figuring out how to reach them on those platforms. And again, it's shocking. It's 2021 and I still see clients copy and paste. Well, not my clients, obviously. Wavemaker clients. But you do, if you go on Twitter and look at a brand, and then on Instagram, and then on TikTok, and then, on TV, you still see a lot of brands who have the copy and paste content, just pushing it out without any respect, frankly, for the nuances of how consumers leverage a platform, what they're looking for, right? You can have the same core story, you can have the same core messaging, but how it translates to a platform when you're looking at a screen this way versus this way. And if it's live events or news or streaming or audio or podcast, you need to respect your audience. And I don't think a lot of marketers think that way. I think they think like, here's our plan, let's amplify. But if you don't go back to that respect through that integrated intuition and true understanding, and not just the data tells you of our consumers are on, this platform, our consumers pay with Venmo, our consumers like TikToks, our consumers buy through Shopify, that doesn't help, right? You don't understand your consumers and respect why they do and how they do and where they go, you're not going to get your message across. You need to tell your story, and it can be this comparable story based on core messaging, but you need to respect the consumers before you can respect the platforms that they're on.
So it sounds like everything is going back to a couple of core truths here, regardless of what we talk about in terms of technology platform, CES, and so on. I also, though, think of you as a little bit of a futurist, although maybe you don't characterize yourself as that. You talked about something which I think a number of us have been talking about how 2020 simply accelerated a lot of these trends, whether it was e-commerce or Zoom calls or working remotely and so on. But do you think that it was also in some way a watershed year for technology in terms of how we will all now simply become just so much more reliant on everything that is digital and e-commerce driven? I expect that we'll all be seeing self-driving, FedEx trucks before we know it, and I don't think we'd even be surprised by it.
I think what's interesting about this year is when you strip away a lot of the offline, you realize that we already were so reliant, right? Mm-hmm. Remember that thing called we did or travel, right? Mm-hmm. You didn't have printed tickets. When's the last time you had a ticket? You had the digital app and it's on your phone and in your email, and you panicked when the email and the Wi-Fi at the airport was slow and you couldn't pull it up to scan, and you deleted something you need. We were already reliant. And again, with things like automation in cars, right? You're not seeing a bunch of cars on the road right now yet with no one in the driver's seat. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot of the automation has been here. It's happening, right? I think when you strip away a lot of the offline human stuff, you realize that we've already been relying on technology. We've just had to double down on it because we had no other option, right? When we went to things called concerts, which I cannot wait to go to again, you pulled out your Ticketmaster and your Live Nation stuff on your phone. We already had all of this reliance, right? We were all walking around CES like animals trying to plug into the walls and trying to find a Wi-Fi signal. And we already had the reliance. I think it opened it up and emphasized it. And I think it's a lot. What's interesting is I think we're moving towards a acceptance versus joking about we need a tech detox. You need management. You need self-management, but this whole tech detox from our devices, it's inherently a part of our lives and we already relied on it. We just had to a lot more. But I do think what's about CES this year is there's a lot more opportunity for integration to make it work smarter, not harder. So for example, with health tech, telehealth obviously had a massive boom this year, but something Brian Cooley said, which I loved, I was talking to him this morning on our panel, is he made a comment of how you need to prove that you're better than, right? So the idea of telehealth was pretty horrifying even to young people because it doesn't feel like it's as good enough that your doctor's not checking you out, right? And some things won't be replaced. You still need to get your annual and you need to get your skin checked, and it's going to be hard to scan your body. But this is the year that as you connect more telehealth platforms to wearables, and you can, instead of me getting my data and having to share it with my care provider and all those gaps of what do I share? How do I do it? Do I email it? That seamless loop and plugging into telehealth platforms more, you start to get to this better than, and you start to see everything that I already use in my life is working better together and better for me. So I think in that way, now that we've embraced okay, tech was already a critical part of our lives. Let's be serious. Let's own this. We can move forward. How do we make it better? How do we work better? How do I make my life better? So I'm not just, I wear my Apple Watch and I get my steps, but what else can I do to ensure that my care provider knows before I do even if something is weird or irregular with my heartbeat? How do I ensure that I can track my family and ensure my family's okay when they're not in the same 300 square feet as me, right?
Right.
How do I ensure that I'm plugged in, but also the people who need to be plugged in are plugged in? I unfortunately lost my grandfather a few months ago. But, we had installed as much technology as we could in his house because while he had an aid, we were very fortunate to get him an aid. Things like him moving in the bed, right? If he fell out, anything like that, it has the ability to impact us and we can alert the caregiver. Creating seamless things, like there was a installation, like a light bulb lighting situation where it would monitor someone who fell, or irregular movements, or a lot of sleep technology and just irregular tracking. You can, whether you have Alzheimer's, dementia, old age, or just anything, the fact that you can previously diagnose or track or get that support and help, not just when you say, I fell out of bed and broke my hip. What's going on with me? Yeah. You don't have to wait for those massive moments of pain and hurt and suffering to live a better life. So I think now that we've embraced that, okay, tech is a core part of our life and it's not going anywhere, and you have that utility, we can digitalize a lot of stuff and digitalize that dullness. We can move towards much more efficiency in our lives, and something that marketers can look to provide utility where we can't do it ourselves.
Oh no, that's a wonderful summary. I was actually going to ask you what's next, and I think that you've actually characterized it pretty well. Unless there's anything else you'd like to add in terms of what does it mean for those concerts, or what does it mean in terms of where we, Actually, one last question. What do you think about CES next year? Obviously it will be in person.
I think it's going to be.
But honestly, you think it'll be hybrid again, or not again?
This year wasn't hybrid, right? So I think most things moving forward will be hybrid, frankly, because there's going to be the health concerns, the safety concerns, the budget concerns. And also, I have a lot of friends who wore a badge of pride of being road warriors and traveling 8 hours for that 1 hour meeting and spending a day in the air. And I think they realized once they got over their withdrawals, it's far more efficient to dial in and do it on Zoom. And you know what? It's just as good. Mm-hmm. So I think whether it's a festival, a work conference, something like CES, I do think you're going to see in different ways, depending on what the human goal is, whether it's networking, whether it's trial, whether it's connectivity, whether it's, whatever the case may be. Depending on the type of event and experience, you're going to see different forms of hybrid. But I do think hybrid is going to be just a core component of what we do because of cost, because of safety, frankly, because of efficiency, right? Yeah. Someone who wants to go on the show floor and touch things once I feel confident in my health and safety. Mm-hmm. But for a lot of our clients, do they need to be there? Or can they plug into the stuff they want and not to what they don't?
Yeah, I think that raises a very good point. And, it is part of the transition that we've talked about, or the acceleration that we've talked about. Well, I hope that you will come back and regale us with a few more things like untethered living and digitalizing dullness, because if nothing else, talk about buzzword bingo. Those things stick in my mind and I think about them all the time, but in a good way, a good buzzword bingo.
Happy to help, and I will have that for you soon.
Oh, it's great. Great to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again. Okay?
Good to you. Stay well.
You too. Thanks, Whitney, for being a part of today's show and for playing an essential role in driving conversations around technology and innovation for leading brands.
And that concludes today's podcast. Thanks again for listening. For more information on The Internationalist, please go to our website, www.theinternationalist.com. By the way, there's a hyphen between the and Internationalist. That's where you'll find more information on podcasts and interviews, as well as highlights of our various initiatives, including Marketing Makes a World of Difference, Internationalist Insights and Studies and Intelligence Briefs, awards and case studies and best practices, peer-to-peer marketing think tanks and forums, and the Internationalist Press. The ability to inspire people to be their best selves is valuable in difficult times. We feel very strongly about the fact that no one does this better than us.